Mercy Me is coming to Pittsburgh. The Together Again tour with Mercy Me, Crowder, and special guest Andrew Ripp. Thursday, October 5th. Bring your family and friends to the PPG Paints Arena in Pittsburgh for Mercy Me, Crowder, and Andrew Ripp live in concert. 3 multiple award-winning artists on one stage for one night. Let your spirit soar, your heart sing, and your faith ignite. Mark your calendars for Thursday, October 5th. Get your tickets now at mercyme.org.
Coming up on this episode of Business Boutique.
In Enneagram parlance, we like to say, it's not what you do that matters, it's why you do it. Because once you surface that motivation, that's real self-knowledge. That's life-transforming self-knowledge.
It's exciting that the Business Boutique was made for you.
I know that I can make a difference in people's lives, and I want to do that.
Hearing a lot of what other people are going through is really healing in a sense and motivating as well.
I have the world in my hand, and I can do whatever I want to.
Learning from some of the top leaders who can make these dreams a reality is just so exciting.
It ignited a passion in me to know she can do that, we can do that too.
I'm so blessed to have heard the podcast that led me to this moment.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Business Boutique. I'm Christy Wright, and today we are talking about your strengths and your weaknesses. Later on in the show, I'll be interviewing Ian Cron. Ian is the best-selling author of the book, The Road Back to You, and he is a master teacher of the Enneagram. We're going to talk about how to apply the Enneagram personality test to your life. And I have a challenge for you that's going to be a little tough love to help you get moving. But first, let's talk about your strengths and your weaknesses. Now, this is a topic that I love because, first of all, it's really great to be self-aware. But second of all, it's really, really important for you to know your strengths and your weaknesses and how they affect your business and your life and, of course, your relationships. Now, I got to tell you guys, I have been a fan of all the personality tests for years, right? Like growing up in high school and college, I was in leadership classes. So I have taken about every personality test you can take. On the Myers-Briggs, I am an ENFP. On the Strengths Finders, one of my top strengths is positivity and activator, for example. On the DISC, I'm a very high I, which means you love people. Y'all know that about me. And I'm also a high D. And then recently, I have gotten into the Enneagram. Now, my friends told me, specifically Rachel Cruz told me all about the Enneagram before I'd ever taken a test or read the book or anything. She told me it's different. It's different. You got to know the Enneagram. You've got to read about the Enneagram. It's fascinating. It's different. I'm like, is it? Like, how is it different? But I'll be honest, after getting into it myself, learning my number, reading the book, I get it. I see what the big deal is. It really is different. I'm an 8 wing 7, and I will tell you, reading this chapter was so eye-opening for me. There were a couple specific lines in the book, The Road Back to You by Ian Cron, who I'll be interviewing later on, and he'll also be speaking at our Business Boutique event. There were a couple lines in his book that y'all brought me to tears. I remember reading this book one day whenever I was getting a manicure. I was sitting there getting my fingernails done for an event coming up, and I was reading, and tears just started streaming down my face at feeling so understood. I felt that I understood myself. I was like, oh, this is why I act this way. This is why I feel this way. Yeah, that's exactly how I see that situation. And so it's fascinating when you begin to understand not just how you behave, not even just how you think, but your deeper motivations and drivers and fears that affect those thoughts, that affect those feelings, that affect those behaviors. And I think it's really, really important for us to understand not just what our strengths are, but also what our weaknesses are. In fact, if you look at it, regardless of the personality style, a strength overused can be a weakness. So I'll give you an example of an 8 on the Enneagram, like I am. 8s are intense. They are fighters and go-getters. They make things happen. They will stick up for the little guy, for the underdog. They will fight for justice. They will make change. They will coach people. They'll bring out the best in others. But because they're so intense, they can be a little aggressive, a little too intense, a little too honest, too blunt. They can come across as hateful. They can come across as too aggressive and too intimidating. And so while you have one aspect of your personality that's a strength, when it's overused or not matured or not self-aware, it can be a weakness. Now, I tell you guys all the time, I want you to stay in your strengths. You are going to be the most successful, not just in business, but in life, when you stay in your strengths, when you stay in your lane, when you stay in your sweet spot, doing what God created you to do. But here's what I really want for you. I want you to be self-aware. I want to be self-aware. And you know what that means? That means knowing your strengths and your weaknesses. There are so many benefits to being self-aware. For example, self-awareness is knowing how you come across to others. Not just how you intend to come across, but how you actually come across. And that will vary depending on who you're talking to or who you're interacting with. Because why? Because they are wired differently than you. And they're putting everything you say, everything you do, every aspect of your body language through their own personal filter of how God created them. But it's so important for you to know if there are themes or patterns in how you come across. I'll give you an example. I've heard a pattern in my life that I am intense, that I am aggressive. Okay. Well, I'll be so honest with you guys. I don't intend to be aggressive. I don't think I'm intense. I think I'm just me. I'm enthusiastic, sure. Passionate, definitely. But intense, aggressive, I wouldn't use those words. Not ever. But you know what? After hearing them enough times, I started to pay attention. This is how I come across to other people. Intense, aggressive. So you know what that does? It gives me a different level of self-awareness to know not only how I intend to come across, but how I actually come across. And I can adjust my tone or behavior or volume level based on who I'm talking to. Self-awareness means that you know both sides of the coin. You know your strengths so you can leverage them, but also your weaknesses so that you can work on them. Self-awareness also, in fact, leads to likability and success. There is a direct correlation between likability and success and a high self-awareness. So it's really important for us to be self-aware, which means knowing both the good, the bad, and everything in between. So I want to spend a few minutes in this episode teaching you what to do with the not so good stuff. We know our strengths. We talk about our strengths all the time. We love focusing on the strengths, but let's focus on the less pretty side of ourselves. Let's talk about our weaknesses and what we do with them. Well, the first thing that I want you to do with your weaknesses are to recognize them. Here's what that means. That means being self-aware, understanding for yourself that this area of your life is a weakness, that this is a blind spot. Y'all, we all have them. Don't feel like there's something wrong with you that you have a blind spot. We all have blind spots. Now, you know what a blind spot is, right? You're driving in the car. You want to change lanes. You start to get over and someone blares the horn at you because they're actually in that lane and you're coming over and you didn't realize it. Well, why didn't you realize it? It's a blind spot. You didn't see them. You didn't know they were there. That's what some of these weaknesses are like for us. We're not even aware that they're there. I wasn't even aware that I came across as aggressive or intense. It's a blind spot. So what are your blind spots? Now, obviously, if you don't know what they are, it's really helpful to have people tell you. There's a few ways that you can figure out what your blind spots are. There's a few ways that you can recognize what your weaknesses are for yourself. One way is pay attention to patterns of what people say about you. Are you seeing a theme? Are people always saying the same thing about you? Like, oh, wow, you're so quiet. You're so passive. You never say anything. You never stand up for yourself. There's a pattern there. I obviously fall on the opposite end of the spectrum. Wow, you're so loud. You're so intense, so passionate, so enthusiastic, so energetic, so excited, so aggressive, right? Like you start to see a pattern in what people say about me. So what do people say about you? Now, if you don't see a pattern immediately, if you haven't picked up on this over time, you can actually ask people. You can ask people what they're thinking, how they're feeling, how you come across, how they perceive you. Hey, did that come across weird? Hey, what were you thinking in that meeting whenever I was presenting this thing? Or hey, what were you thinking during this pitch? You can actually ask people, and then if those people know you, if they feel safe with you, they will tell you what they actually think. They will tell you how you come across to other people. Another way for you to figure out what your weaknesses are is to take a personality test. So the Enneagram is very helpful when it comes to focusing on your weaknesses. You can also take the DISC assessment or the Myers-Briggs or something else. And usually most of those assessments will show you the good and the bad. We always focus on the good, which is great, but you also can learn about the bad stuff, the flaws, the setbacks, the hurdles, the challenges that each of us have. So the very first thing that I want you to do with your weaknesses is simply to recognize them. You can't work on something you don't know about. You can't steer clear of a blind spot that you don't know is there. So the first thing is simply to recognize for yourself what those weaknesses are, and that really comes down to self-awareness. Now, the second thing that I want you to do is to acknowledge them. That means I want you to actually call them out. I want you to own them. I want you to be forthcoming with your weaknesses. And that's not to say you've got to broadcast them. You've got to walk around telling everyone about all of your downfalls or your temptations or your frustrations or whatever. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is when you sense that you are acting out of a weakness or you are coming across in a certain way, go ahead and call it out. Go ahead and acknowledge it with the other person so they don't have to. Here's what's so amazing about this. When you go ahead and acknowledge that you are aware that this is a weakness or you're struggling with this, what it does is it completely disarms the other person. They feel immediate relief because they don't have to call you out. They don't even feel the pressure of the awkwardness in the room, like, man, this person's being crazy. I wonder if they know they're being crazy. Should I tell them they're being crazy? They don't have to do that because you said, hey, I know I'm being crazy, but like you call it out. I'll give you an example. I have a leader named Jeremy Breland over the personalities, and he has worked with me for years. So he knows that I have 100 ideas a day, truly. And one of the things that we struggle with my ideas is, first of all, not all of them are good. Second of all, we can't possibly execute on all of them with the team and resources that we have, but I just continue to have them. So here's an example. I will walk in his office and I will say, Jeremy, listen, I know I have 100 ideas a day. However, I've got one more. I just want to put it in front of you. If we can't move forward with it, that's totally fine. But I just wanted to throw this out there. Now, see, when I walked in and acknowledged, hey, it's a weakness of mine that I have 9 million ideas and expect them all to go through and they don't. So I'm going to go ahead and acknowledge that up front. I'm going to go ahead and put everyone at ease that I realize I do this every day. Okay. Here's why this is so great. You can move forward on the same baseline with the other person. I acknowledge that I have 100 ideas a day. He acknowledges that I have 100 ideas a day. He knows that I know that he knows, I know that he knows that I know that I have this weakness. Y'all, it's amazing how beneficial that can be. Now, let's just say I don't acknowledge it. Let's give a completely different scenario where I go busting in his office. I go, hey, Jeremy, I've got this new idea and we've got to do it. This is what we've got to do. And he's like, yeah, we've been here before. We do this every day, right? Like it completely disarms the other person when you acknowledge it. So what is that weakness? What is something you're feeling or a behavior you're exhibiting? What is maybe just something where you're having a tough time? I'll give you another example. I came in today exhausted, a little grumpy, little on the grouchy side. I wasn't hiding it well, okay? And I realized this. I realized that I was grouchy and grumpy. And I also realized that it's no one's fault around me that I was grouchy and grumpy. So I stopped before we even started recording this podcast. And I said to my podcast producer, hey, I want you to know I'm just tired. I'm not mad. I'm not mad at anyone. I'm just tired. I'm tired at home. I don't sleep at night. We've been on camera all day. I'm just tired. I'm so sorry I've come across so grouchy because I'm just tired. It's not you. It's me. Now, what's so amazing about this is not that it completely solved the problem and I'm 100% less grouchy or less tired, but we both could acknowledge what was really going on in the situation. So what's going on with you? What situation are you in where you might be either tired or frustrated or feeling insecure, or you got 100 ideas a day, or you're getting angry or making assumptions about someone? Stop and say, hey, here's what's really going on. Here's what I'm feeling. Here's why I'm acting this way. Here's why I'm saying this in this way. Here's why I'm looking at this from this angle. If you simply acknowledge where you're coming from and maybe the weaknesses that are influencing that, it's amazing how it can be so beneficial to you and the other person in that scenario. So the first thing I want you to do with your weaknesses is to recognize them for yourself. The second thing is to acknowledge them with the other person you're interacting with. It's amazing how this will disarm the situation and takes the pressure off the other person of feeling this awkwardness like, do they know they're being crazy? You're like, yeah, I do. I'm so sorry. I'm being crazy. Let's move forward with this baseline of understanding that I'm being crazy. So when you recognize them and then you acknowledge them immediately, it takes the pressure off you and the other person. But there's one more step. You're not totally off the hook. This doesn't mean that you just get to go around blasting your weaknesses as a pass to continue to act that way. It doesn't mean that, oh, well, this is a weakness of mine. Well, I struggle with details, so I'll never pay attention again. Or I'm always late. I really struggle to be on time, so I'll just be late everywhere. I'm just a passionate person, so sometimes I'm just going to be hot-headed and angry. So too bad. This is how God made me. No. We don't get a free pass just because we recognize it and acknowledge it. We actually have a third step, which is to work on it. I want you to work on your weaknesses. See, it's so easy to feel like, oh, well, this is how God made me. And we just use that as an excuse to be quick-tempered, to be hateful, to be fill in the blank, whatever that thing is. That might be true. That might be a weakness for you. That might be a struggle or temptation for you. That might even be a blind spot for you. But it doesn't mean that you get to stay there. It doesn't mean that you get to use that as an excuse or a free pass to be hateful, to be passive, to fill in the blank with whatever that weakness is. Instead, you need to work on it. We all need to work on our weaknesses to grow, to mature, to be better human beings in the world. But we can't do that if we don't actively work on those things. So, told you guys I'm aggressive and intense and passionate and all of those things. I could just say, well, too bad. That's how I am. I'm an Enneagram 8. Too bad, take it or leave it. No. Here's the thing. You can actually work on these things and you can grow in these areas in ways that you would not believe. Instead, sometimes I need to learn to be quiet. I need to learn to submit. I need to learn to respect authority a lot more. I need to learn to apologize quicker. I need to learn to let someone else lead. I need to learn to sit back and shut my mouth sometimes. That doesn't mean that I always just get to take the lead and do what I want to. Instead, I'm learning to work on my weaknesses. So once you know what your weaknesses are and you've called them out with other people, it's still on you to work on them. You don't get to say, oh, that's just the way that I am. Instead, you're going to mature and you're going to take personal responsibility to work on those things. I remember sitting in a conversation with my leader, Jeremy Breland, years ago, and he was coaching me on something. And everything in me wanted to fight. Everything in me wanted to defend myself and tell him why that wasn't the accurate situation or that wasn't the representation of how I meant to act or how things meant to go and so on. Everything in me wanted to defend myself as he's giving me some constructive criticism. But you know what I did instead? I bit my tongue, which that right there is a spiritual gift. If you can do that, especially if you're like me, I bit my tongue and I said, I'm so sorry. I'll do better. I will work on that and I will do better. Y'all, those words are so helpful in any situation. Maybe someone's giving you some feedback that's hard to hear. Maybe you had a fight with your spouse and you feel like you are so right and they are so wrong. Just simply choosing to work on your part of it, taking personal responsibility of how you contributed to whatever that situation is and saying, you know what, I'm sorry. I'm tired. I'm sorry. I'm grouchy. I'm sorry I spoke up too much. I'm sorry I stepped on your toes. I'm sorry I came across hateful. I'm sorry for how I contributed to that. I'm sorry and I'll do better. It's amazing what a gift that is for the other person when you not only recognize your weaknesses and acknowledge them, but then you choose to go above that and continue to work on them and be better. I'll tell you guys, this is a long journey. I would love to flip a switch and not struggle with these things that I struggle with. I know you would too. But this is a long journey of working on your weaknesses. But if you do these three things, if you recognize them, if you acknowledge them, and then you work on them, I promise you will not only become more self-aware, you will not only be a more mature, well-rounded, pleasant person to be around, you will also improve every relationship and interaction in your life. All right, y'all, if you want to stay in your lane and understand your sweet spot and really bring your strengths to the marketplace, well, there's no better way to do that than by joining my Business Boutique Academy. You've been asking about it, and we are about to open for enrollment on Friday, October 25th. That's coming up soon, so mark your calendars, plan your budget so you don't miss out. The Academy is my online training and coaching group where you get the plan and tools that you need to reach your goals, regardless of the stage of business that you're in. Enrollment is only open for a few days though, so go ahead and mark your calendars for October 25th. You can also join the waitlist now by texting Academy Waitlist, all one word, to 33444. All right, y'all, I'm so excited about my guest today, Cron. Ian is the best-selling author of The Road Back to You, a book that I personally love and has transformed my life. And he is a master teacher of the Enneagram. Ian, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Christy. I'm delighted.
Okay, as soon as I found out you were in Nashville, I was like, we have to get him in here because this book was transformative for me. And many of you guys that have watched YouTube, listened to me on the podcast, you know I've talked about the Enneagram, but let's hear it from the man himself. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your book and what the Enneagram is.
Sure. Well, I live in Franklin, Tennessee. I'm married to a beautiful 9 on the Enneagram, whose name is Anne.
I love it.
Right? I have 3 kids. Kaylee, who is an 8 on the Enneagram.
Love Kaylee. Me and Kaylee connect.
All right, then my next daughter down is Maddie. She's a 9.
Okay.
Right? And then my son Aiden, who is a 7.
Okay.
And then my dog Percy, who is also a 7.
Sure, absolutely.
Because all dogs are essentially 7s.
That
or
makes sense.
Puppies anyway,
Sure.
are all essentially 7s. And I'm a therapist, I'm an author, I'm a speaker, and I just love talking about the mystery of human beings and how incredible it is just to have the gift of being here on this planet and living.
It's amazing the stories that you tell in your book and how transformative just an understanding of how we're wired or our natural tendencies can be for someone when you read it. And I think what was so eye-opening to me about your book and about the Enneagram is it really is different than other personality styles. So let's just start there. Like, how is this different from your own words than your typical Strengths Finders, Myers-Briggs, that kind of thing? And then I'll chime in on how it was different for me. So for you, just an understanding of how it's different.
Well, I mean, I love any assessment or personality typology that helps people develop self-knowledge because I just think it's a critical thing to have in life, to really understand yourself and also by extension other people. Right? And how they see the world and function in the world. So I love Myers-Briggs, DISC, Strength Finders, Colby, Hogan. I can go through the whole long list of them, right? Here's what makes the Enneagram different. The Enneagram doesn't just focus on characteristics and traits, but the unconscious motivation. What is it that's driving ways of acting, thinking, and feeling, right, that we exhibit in the world? What's driving it, right? So in Enneagram parlance, we like to say, it's not what you do that matters, it's why you do it.
Okay, the motivations, underlying motivation.
Right, because once you surface that motivation, that's real self-knowledge. That's big league self-knowledge. That's life-transforming self-knowledge. When you realize, oh, that's what's been driving the bus. That's why all those years that I didn't know it, why I was in these repeating patterns of behaving and didn't know it, right? So the second thing I love about the Enneagram is that it reveals not only what's best about you, but what's worst about you.
Sure does.
And how what's worse about you is what's best about you. And so once you have self-knowledge and the ability to self-observe on a daily basis, then you can start to make different choices instead of being stuck in the rut of your personality style and just acting out. Right. You know?
And that makes sense because if you're only talking at the surface level of your behaviors, your habits, and you're not understanding the root level of what your motivation is, then you're always going to have that pattern, like you said. All right, I know what it is because I love the book, but you tell our listeners, what is the Enneagram?
Right, great question. So the Enneagram is an ancient personality typing system that teaches there are 9 basic personality types in the world, one of which we gravitate toward and adopt in childhood as a way to feel safe and cope in the world.
Okay.
Right? Very importantly, there is an unconscious motivation that powerfully influences the way that type acts, thinks, and feels. Can I just run through the 9 types with you?
I would love it.
Really, really fast.
Yes.
So this is a fraction of what could be said about each of the 9 types. Ready?
Yes.
Ones, they're called the perfectionists, and they are motivated by a need to perfect themselves, others, and the world. 2s are called the helpers, and their unconscious motivation is to serve and meet the needs of other people to win their approval and love.
Okay.
Right?
I can already think of some people that come to mind.
Yeah. All right. So 3s are called the performers, and 3s have a need to succeed, to appear successful, and to avoid failure at all costs.
I thought I was a 3 when I read your book, but then I realized I wasn't. But I identify with some of that.
Well, that's because the number you are there's 3 numbers on the Enneagram. They're called the assertive triad. And you're one of those 3 assertives.
Yes.
And 3s are assertives, right?
Yes.
4s are called the individualists. I'm a 4.
Okay.
4s have a sense that there's something fundamentally missing in their essential makeup, so they have a need to be special and unique as a way to compensate for that fatal flaw. Okay. 5s are called the investigators, sometimes the observers, which I love. 5s have a need to perceive and understand everything. They are knowledge gathering, information.
My husband,
information
so
junkies
much information.
who want to swallow all that information in order to fend off what feels like an overwhelming world that demands too much.
Yeah. And they retain it. Because I want my husband to take us on a trivia show and win us $1 million. Because he knows every fact about anything ever.
And we're talking about Trivial Pursuit times 10.
100%.
Yeah.
Yes, he could do it.
I know. You can't make it up. It's it's pretty predictable.
It is.
6s are called the loyalists. 6s see a world that's very chaotic and dangerous. And so they're worst case scenario thinkers whose unconscious motivation really is to feel safe and secure. Right?
A lot of fear.
Anxiety would be a better word because it's not actually rooted in anything. There's no clear and present danger.
Okay.
That's fear.
Okay.
Right? It's just anxiety, which is it's like, what if this happened?
Yeah, the shadow in the closet lurking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
7s are called the enthusiasts. I've got a son who's a 7. Fantastic. Bob Goff, a dear friend who many people probably know, is a 7 off the charts.
Yeah.
Right?
7s are so proud to be a 7.
Oh, yeah.
Like, no one tells you their number as fast as 7. They're like, well, I'm a 7.
Right.
So they're like so proud.
It's
like,
exactly
we're the fun ones.
Yeah, right. Until you see the dark side.
Right.
And there is a dark side to every type. I mean, they're all beautiful when they're healthy. When they're not, So the unconscious motivation of a 7 is I want to pursue fun and excitement and adventures and stimulating things to do and ideas in service so that I can avoid feeling difficult and unpleasant feelings or facing unpleasant realities.
Okay.
8s are the challengers. These are people who assert strength and power over the environment in order to mask vulnerability and weakness within themselves.
Yep. Just make it happen. Just make it happen.
Right.
Yep.
Last 9s are called the peacemakers. I'm married to one. The sweethearts of the Enneagram, we call them sometimes. 9s have an unconscious motivation. They're driven by a need to maintain the peace, to keep connections whole with other people, and to avoid conflict at all costs.
So I'm curious, with all the different numbers, do you feel like that there are tendencies between either gender or any other correlations?
Right.
Like, do you see that women tend to be more of these numbers and men these numbers? Or I'll give you an example. I'm reading a lot of books right now on strong-willed children because my second is so by the book, strong-willed child. But as I'm reading, I'm like, I totally understand. Like, it's like I am a strong-willed adult. And so I'm like, oh, is there a correlation there between being a strong-willed child and being an 8? Or do you see any overlaps or patterns when it comes to the numbers and other things?
Well, I don't think there's any sort of cluster of more men as 8s
or
and more women as 2s. Those are cultural expectations.
Right, yeah.
But they are not necessarily how it falls out. I know plenty of men who are 2s. So I don't think there's any that certain genders gravitate towards certain types. Every gender, however, feels pressured within its cultural context, maybe to act like a certain, right? So, for example, you're a woman 8. We live in a culture that loves men 8s, but finds women 8s too aggressive.
It's so true, but what's interesting, and a lot of the women that are watching and listening right now, of all different numbers, for example, what we're seeing is business is so accessible. So the risk is low, the cost is low. You can start a business tomorrow with a Facebook page.
Right.
So what you're seeing is a lot of women, men too, but I specifically work with women, getting into business, any type of business, and they don't identify as an entrepreneur, business owner, a leader. You know, they might be, I'm just a mom. I'm just a teacher. So they have an identity about themselves that they feel like disqualifies them from building a business. And what's so fascinating is they're surprising themselves. They're exceeding their own expectations because, to your point, they may have natural tendencies, but business is not just for one type of number or one gender.
No.
And they're rocking it, but they come into business, I call them accidental entrepreneurs. You know, they didn't really set out to be an entrepreneur. They would never say, I'm so business aggressive. But I think when you look at the gender correlations there, if you have certain numbers that maybe wouldn't identify with that, and they're surprising themselves. So how, I know there are certain professions that are really good for some, for others, whatever. How is it something where we can use the knowledge about ourselves to make sure that we're in our sweet spot, in our strengths, doing something that's maximizing kind of who we're wired to be?
It's a great question. As an overarching principle, and this is going to sound new agey, and I don't want it to because it's not how it was intentionally written. It was not how the idea of following your bliss, right? Your passion.
Yeah.
Right? So,
yes.
So what was originally meant when that was written was do what aligns with who you are. You know what I mean? Like just do what aligns with who you are as a human being, right? So that's just beyond even conversations about personality, right? And when you do, you'll start to really flourish. You'll flower. You know what I mean?
Like you'll feel it.
You'll feel the energy of it, the passion, the rush of it. I think for different personality types, as they go about their work, it's just so important for them to be mindful of the traps of their type and the strengths of their type, and to be able to stand back and just observe what's going on. Because all day long, between health and unhealth, we're kind of bobbing around in here.
Yeah, right.
So that you can just keep course correcting, as you go about your day. So another thing would be this morning, I could get lost in feelings about something that came up. I'm a 4, very feeling-based human being. And then I realized, you know what, Ian? Facts trump the feeling. And the fact is, you have interviews in 3 hours from now.
Right.
You may want to get out of these feelings and get some stuff done beforehand. You know what I'm saying?
I remember reading that about the 4s. Yeah, it's this whole other world. Yeah.
So that awareness prevented me from arriving here unprepared.
Okay.
Because I was like, yeah, you know what? It's just a feeling. Got to move on. Get down to the fact. The reality is that I got to go get ready for work.
Okay, I've got a question. So this is so powerful when it comes to relationships. Any relationships, not just, someone you're married to, but just friends, coworkers, in-laws, it doesn't matter. Let's say that you have read the Enneagram, you're working on your own self-awareness and your own maturity and health and so on, but you're interacting with someone that is not healthy. Like they're like, you know what I mean? They're the 2 that's buying cars and they're they're, you know what I mean? There's someone that, like, how do you navigate this territory? Because once you have this knowledge, it's so powerful and you want everybody else to have it. I was joking even before we went live that Rachel Cruz is the one that was like, you've got to read this book. And I was like, you're crazy. This is like everything. And I read it. I was like, you got to read this book, like to everybody that I talk to. But once you have this knowledge, you want everyone else to have it. But for someone that doesn't, how do you best navigate those relationships for someone maybe that isn't as healthy or, they've got a different style than you and it's just difficult. Like it's just hard.
Yeah. Well, there are some relationships that don't work.
Yeah.
Sometimes it really does. I mean, if you're in unhealthy relationships or you're with someone who really lacks self-knowledge and is a little nutty, like for example, with 2s, I'm always saying, who needs to be called off your list of friends? I mean, that's a terrible thing to say. Yeah. But 2s pick them up like metal filings. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like metal filings.
Yeah,
People are just attaching to them. And I'm like, you need to call the list here. Because, it's getting a little long. You can't maintain all these relationships. Oftentimes I have someone at one of my workshops come up and they'll say to me, I want to make sure, I brought my husband because I really want him to know his type and I want him to change.
Please fix him.
Please fix him.
My husband.
No.
He's the one with the problem.
No, seriously. You cannot begin to tell you how often people essentially say that,
and you're
if
like,
not
why don't
outright.
you take a seat? And I'm going to spend some time with you.
Exactly. So what I tell them is, I just tell people all the time, do your own work.
Yep. Yeah, that's good.
Just do your own work. Don't start trying to fix other people. Don't try and, make other people conform to your expectations or needs. Just do your own work, okay? And maybe they'll catch the contagion of how beautiful it is to have self-knowledge and to live more aware in the world, how you're affecting other people and yourself. So number 1 is that. Number 2 is whenever people are in conflict with each other or, personality bumping, ask questions.
That's good.
Ask questions. In conflict, ask questions. Don't stop it. Literally, like if I'm in an argument with someone, I go, so tell me what's going on here? And it sounds to me like you're feeling this. Is that true?
Yeah.
Or I'll say, what do you think would happen if you were to approach that this way? Because people generally don't get forced to the water trough. They get invited. And questions have a way of inviting people to actually question their own assumptions and why they're acting or thinking the way they are.
I love that. I love that piece of advice. Ken Coleman, who you've met before, and before he was on our team as a Ramsey personality, he came and did a devotional for us, and his whole devotional was on asking questions. And it really impacted me because when you ask questions, and this is a great kind of takeaway as we wrap up, is it takes a posture of humility.
Yes.
And that's a really good word for me as an 8, to take a posture of humility, because when you're asking a question, it's very difficult to get mad at someone that's asking and expresses genuine interest in the other person and, genuine interest in how they're doing and how they're thinking and how they're feeling. And so regardless of your number, that's just a really great takeaway. Whether it's conflict or communication, just asking more questions.
So what you just exhibited was self-awareness, right? Okay. You have self-knowledge. I'm an 8. Your communication style, typically for an 8, is very authoritarian.
Yes.
It is commanding. Is a word that oftentimes Enneagram teachers will use. You typically would not ask people questions. You would just tell them.
It's so much faster.
What to do. Mic drop. Right? Okay. So the fact that you have enough self-awareness now to say, I need to ask questions.
Yeah.
That is the gift of self-knowledge and self-awareness. You are making different choices than you would were you to be living in the autopilot of your 8 personality.
Right.
You would be just banging guardrail to guardrail through your husband's life and at work and everywhere else. But you now are able to stop and pause and go, I know this about me, and I know that there are things I need to do as an antidote to those parts of myself that are just excessive.
Yeah.
That I
help
need
grow.
to rein in.
Yeah. I love how even in your book you talked about specifically, I'm an 8-wing 7. What I really identified with is the high energy, which people say about me and they love about me, but 8-wing 7 can be so high energy that we neglect sleep.
Oh, yeah.
Food.
Oh, yeah.
Your own self-care. And I really do that. Like I would, even back in college, like I would pull all-nighters working on stuff, And
you got mono. Did you get mono?
Yes. And it was just like, I will still to this day run myself into the ground. And people are like, how do you do it? I'm like, it's not a good model, So for me, even the health aspect of it, of your personality style, depending on what your number is, to understand there's so many benefits to this self-knowledge of what drives you, because what drives you will have an effect in your relationships, in your work, in your business, with your clients, with your health, with your overall happiness with your own life. And so I just love it. Okay, tell me a little bit about how the Enneagram has helped you in your parenting, in your marriage, in your business, in your faith, like just kind of overall, and how people can use that. Because I don't want people to think it's just a book I read, I understand myself, and then that's where it stops, because this overflows. It transforms my marriage and how I understand my husband. It overflows into everyone around you.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about the ripple effect, if you will, of the Enneagram.
Well, it revolutionized every category of my life that you just mentioned. My faith, my marriage, my parenting, my work, everything. Because as I grew in self-knowledge and in my awareness of how other people are different from me, I just began to move more easily through the world, and with more compassion and with more love and with more understanding for myself, right? And for those people who I rub shoulders with every single day, right? So like in my marriage, man, when I discovered my wife was a 9, like let's just talk about marriage for a second.
Okay.
Like when I discovered she was a 9, well, first of all, suddenly all the sort of dysfunctional dances that we were in, like every marriage has them, right? I suddenly went, oh, it's not personal. You're not that way because it's personal.
That's exactly how I felt when I read about 5s. I thought, oh, it's not that Matt doesn't love me is not why he's expressing feelings. He just does not express feelings how I understand it.
Exactly.
And so that was transformative. I didn't take it so personally.
Completely. And now here's the other thing. It gives you a vernacular or a vocabulary for you to talk to each other about in day to day. Sometimes my wife will be doing something, and I used to say, gosh, please have an opinion. Right? Right? Yeah. And now, instead of me blaming her or having her feel like I'm, like kind of prosecuting her for something, I'll say, baby, I'm kind of picking up on this 9 thing right now. Now, she agrees she's a 9.
Yeah.
I know she's a 9.
You didn't impose that on her.
I didn't impose it. So I don't know. I'm just feeling like you're not ponying up to this decision.
Yeah.
And she'd be like, oh. See, now we have a vocabulary now about our relationship. And she could say to me, I think you're a little stuck in your feelings, buddy. I think maybe you ought to start doing something instead of just feeling something. You know what I mean?
Like, that's good, yeah.
So now, and it's brought a sense of humor to our marriage.
Yeah, you can laugh about it, totally.
Yeah, we laugh about our little type kind of flaws and gifts. So I don't know. I could go through it in every single one of those categories in terms of faith and just business. And seriously, I hope that I move more wisely through the world. I think before I knew the Enneagram, to a certain extent, I was just tripping over more furniture in a dark room.
Yes.
I just trip over less furniture.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm talking about it as a metaphor for life,
totally,
right?
Yeah.
I'm just tripping over less furniture. I'm not having as many conflicts with other people, misunderstandings. I have more self-compassion. I have more compassion for other people, more appreciation for all the different kinds of people God made. I mean, the list can go on and on. But I do tell people, it's not a standalone tool. It ain't magic. It's an imperfect model. What it's going to give you is a low-resolution picture of another human being. And it will not be, it'll still be blurry. It's not exact. It's not, it's not magic or precise. But it's a better picture than the one I had before.
That's right. That's right.
So I'll take it.
That's right. That's right. It is an improvement. Well, I know everyone watching and listening right now is thinking, okay, where can I find the book, hear about your podcast? And I know you've got a new exciting assessment. So tell us about all the things where they can find it so they can have this knowledge and grow as well.
Yeah. So my book is The Road Back to You, an Enneagram Journey Towards Self-Discovery. You can get that on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, wherever you get your books, right? My podcast is called Typology. And it's a really fun show on which I actually interview other types or panels of types.
I love it. I listen to it. It's so good. Yeah,
just
hearing that conversation.
Totally, and having them describe what their experience of life is like is so illuminating. And I did just launch a new assessment called IEQ9. And if folks went to Ian Cron, IANCRON.com, or it could be IanMorganCron.com, and just hit the tab for IEQ9, this assessment really is fantastic. I think it's the most comprehensive and accurate Enneagram assessment out there.
Okay.
Right? And there's tons of them.
Sure.
Right? Find the IEQ9 test and take it, figure out their type. It gives a tremendous amount of information for each of the 9 types.
I love it. I'll tell you what I love. When people have told me they've taken some other assessment, some other place, I'm like, you need to read the book. This was even before I knew you had an assessment, because reading the whole book helped me not just understand myself, but understand other people.
Boom.
And that's really, really important, because I think it's tempting to be like, oh, let's learn about me and move on with my life. But gosh, even reading the other personality styles, I'll interact with someone and I won't tell them I think you're, too, but it helps me understand if they are, here's what's going on. And here's how I can navigate that.
Well said. Well said. So assessments are fantastic if they're well constructed and modeled. But I do encourage people, know every type.
Yeah.
There's no point in just knowing your type.
Yeah.
Right.
It does give you that empathy, that compassion, that grace.
It's fascinating.
For other people. Yeah, absolutely.
It's also fascinating.
Makes sense. That's like, Ian, you are such a joy to be around. I know that your content, your teaching, your podcast, book, everything has transformed so many people's lives and their marriages. It has that ripple effect well beyond anything you'll see this side of heaven. So thanks for what you do, and thanks for being here.
Thanks.
Now, if you want to hear more from Ian and all of our amazing speakers, you don't want to miss our Business Boutique Conference coming up October 24th through the 26th. I'll be there speaking along with an amazing lineup of complete rock stars that includes Dave Ramsey, Jasmine Starr, Bob Goff, Jennifer Allwood, Stacy Tuschel, Jamie Ivey, Ashley Lemieux, Mignon Francois, Kelsey Humphreys, and more. You know I have a special code just for you, my Business Boutique listeners. When you use the code BBWright at businessboutique.com, you'll get $10 off any ticket to the Business Boutique Conference. That's BBWRIGHT. Y'all, this event is incredible, and I promise you, you don't want to miss it. All right, guys, now I want to spend a few minutes giving you a challenge, and it's a little bit of tough love, but I promise it's going to help you get going. As a speaker and author, I'm always trying to find ways to say something differently, right? Like you want to say something new that hasn't been said before, because the world is full of overused cliche phrases. Let's just go through a few examples, shall we? Okay, I'm going to start it and you finish it in your mind. I know you will, because immediately you will know the answer. Where there's a will, there's a way. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. It's the thought that counts. Here's the thing about these cliche phrases, right? Most of them are overused because they're true, except that last one. It's the thought that counts. Really? Like, who came up with that? And who has used it so much that it has just lasted for centuries? I'll tell you who. People that don't do anything, right? Like, oh, it's the thought that counts, said every person who has never followed through on their intentions ever, right? It's not the thought that counts. Y'all, it's not the thought that counts. Here's the thing. I'll give you an example. My husband's birthday is coming up. There is not a chance in the world that he will be bragging the day after his birthday about what I thought about doing. Like, oh, my wife, she was going to take me to my favorite concert. My favorite band was in town, and she was going to get me tickets. And oh my gosh, like she thought about it. She never got around to it, never bought the tickets, never made reservations or got childcare. But hey, she thought about it. No! No one cares what you think about. No one cares what you know. They care what you do. I don't know where this idea came from, but I will tell you as an example. Your thoughts do not change your relationships. Your actions do. Your thoughts do not change your business. Your actions do. Your thoughts do not reach your goals. Your actions do. It doesn't matter what you know. It matters what you do. Speaking of cliche quotes, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And I know we have many, but here's the deal. It is not the thought that counts. It's what you do that counts. And I think that's important for you all to hear, because as you're listening to this and as you're watching right now, I know that you know a lot. You're really smart. You might not have an MBA, maybe you didn't go to Harvard, but you are very smart about the things that you have experienced, the education you have, the background you have, the industry that you're in. You know a lot. And I would be willing to bet that it's easy, even tempting, to coast on that. Be like, well, I know a lot. I know a lot about this thing. So I'm going to stay here in my comfort zone, in my safe little padded small box of the things that I know. And I'm just going to rest on the things that I know. It doesn't matter what you know. It matters what you do. It matters what you do with what you know. So do you have an idea? Great. What are you going to do about it? You have a dream? Great. What are you going to do about it? You've got a plan? Great. What are you going to do about it? It doesn't matter what you know. It matters what you do. It is not the thought that counts. It's what you actually do that counts. And when you do this, when you actually take action on your ideas, when you implement what you're learning, when you start to do something about this stuff that you know and you feel and you dream in your heart, when you start to take action, you really can chase your dream. You really can build a business. You really can create a legacy. You really can make an impact and even change the world. You really can. And if not, well, it's the thought that counts, right? All right, before we go, I want to remind you to subscribe and review the podcast on your podcast app. Tell us how your business is growing and share your story, just like Redeemed Made New did on Apple Podcasts. Here's what she wrote. I started my business in 2018 and found Christy shortly after. Her podcast has helped not only educate me on many different aspects of my business, but also helped keep me inspired and motivated when things were slow. I've listened to almost every episode and I just can't get enough. Thanks for being so down to earth. Oh, that's awesome. I love hearing stories like this of people making progress. Redeemed Made New, I'm proud of you. Thanks for listening. All right, y'all, that's it for this week. Thanks so much for hanging out with me as always. For more encouragement on how to make money doing what you love, visit businessboutique.com. Hey y'all, if you enjoy the Business Boutique podcast, I want to tell you about the Rachel Cruz Show podcast, available now on the Ramsey Network.
Hey guys, it's Rachel Cruz, and I'm so excited to tell you about my podcast. A lot of people are living paycheck to paycheck. They're in debt. They don't even know where to begin, but they have this need, this want to get in control of their money. And if that's you, you have come to the right spot. So in each episode, you're going to get a ton of inspiration and practical advice. If you've not subscribed to the Rachel Cruz Show podcast, make sure you do it today.
To hear full episodes, search Rachel Cruz wherever you listen to podcasts or go to rachelcruz.com.
Mercy Me is coming to Pittsburgh, the Together Again tour with Mercy Me, Crowder, and special guest Andrew Rip, Thursday, October 5th. Bring your family and friends to the PPG Paints Arena in Pittsburgh for Mercy Me, Crowder, and Andrew Rip live in concert. 3 multiple award-winning artists on one stage for one night. Let your spirit soar, your heart sing, and your faith ignite. Mark your calendars for Thursday, October 5th. Get your tickets now at mercyme.org.